The following is a conversation with Jonny Farrow, a good friend of the show. Started off his life as an electronics engineer for Rolls-Royce and then moved on to a project manager for PlayStation at Sony.
I've sort of worked in product for a number of years on sort of technical product, and we started to look into AI within those products, which then drove me into studying for my master's in artificial intelligence, so that I can then start applying that internally and building products in that space.
Today we're going to talk about machine learning and AI and how that can be used in project development. And we also have a decent conversation here about how different team processes work in larger corporations like Sony against how you should do it in your startup. Enjoy the show. This episode is brought to you by Codesphere, and you can subscribe to the podcast on anywhere good podcasts are released.
This is the Startup Architects.
Did you see that MIT scientist recently that came out and said the machines at this point now have a limited form of consciousness? Yeah, it stirred up a lot of people. A lot of people said this is ridiculous, and some people said, oh, we don't know what consciousness is. So, in fact, I can have a conversation with this AI, and I can't have a conversation with my dog or a frog or anything small like that. Is it not a limited form? Yeah.
Yeah, it's a really difficult one because there's no solid answer, and it's just not how we work as humans, right? There's no answer there. You can't have a conversation with a bird, but you can with an AI. So where's the line?
And the fact it's like self-learning now, that its intelligence is increasing.
Maybe we need like a definitive answer, like the ability for its species to reproduce organically or something. I don't know.
It's so vague, and I've been reading this book. I think I mentioned it last episode with The Reality Plus by David Chalmers. It's a book about like the philosophy of reality and like what point do you then start calling virtual reality? Because if we're in a simulation, then this is our reality. It's real to us, and all of this stuff is so tangled up. And when you start diving into it, it's just like it's crazy.
Well, what about this? What about if you put like two humans in a vacuum? Like obviously they can breathe, they can reproduce. If you put two birds on a planet with nothing else, they can reproduce. If you put two robots on a planet or two AIs, they can't, because they have to still go find and mine the materials, and you have to assume those materials are there.
Yeah, but I think the reproduction is one thing, but the consciousness and the actual like, mind of that robot is another thing, because you could program a robot to reproduce.
Not without like external things though, right? You need to have like silicon from a silicon thing somewhere, or parts for its components.
You could have it so it reproduces its own code, so then it like, improves itself, and then takes over the host machine that it was on.
Because you could argue that humans can't do that. You can't reproduce your own consciousness. You can just reproduce another copy which has a different, separate, new consciousness,
which is just a set of rules. I actually really like there's a thought experiment called the Chinese thought.
The Chinese thought.
The Chinese room thought experiment, which says it was an argument against intelligence. But if you put a person that only speaks English in a room, and in front of them is Chinese symbols, Chinese words, and ask them to match them up together. Well, obviously they can't do that, but if you give them a set of instructions in English that says this symbol goes with this word, to an outside observer, that would look like intelligence, right? That this person has been able to, this person can speak Chinese, they can match them. But the person in the room knows they can't. They're just following some instructions. And that was always the arguments against. No, that's all like machines are doing. It's just one input output. But now you've got sort of this sort of machine learning where it's just put data in and it's going to now define its own rules based on that data. That kind of thought experiment no longer applies. So use that as a basis for consciousness. Is that adding?
Yeah, that's super interesting, because it's just like, again, with the whole kind of like concept of what consciousness in a robot might be. It's just basically inputs, it's kind of like against that Chinese word experiment. You're right.
Wasn't there like if you put a Russian speaker in a room with Chinese symbols and then give the instructions in English? So it's like another level of it as well.
Yeah, there's a sort of a deeper version, but the simplified version is basically here's some instructions. Go. And it looks like a person can speak multiple languages or a language.
It's a really fascinating topic, isn't it? That kind of like learning around an algorithm, because it also learns and puts things together in a very, very different way than the human brain can. And it's like a lot of people attribute it to the way that like YouTube has kind of like debased the whole culture around news. And the fact that, a YouTube algorithm can think so much faster and connect so much quicker than a human brain can now, that it's like joining dots that really aren't there. And it actually leads to a lot of the subversive content that you see, which you think like, I'm a genius for sticking this all together. But really it's just an algorithm saying this seems to sit in the same world.
Well, there's that whole like amazing recommendation engines that are getting to know people more and more. It's like Netflix. Remember they put out that competition?
I don't know about that.
They said to loads of AI teams that, we'll pay you so many million and give you so many % for this if you can make the recommendation better.
Okay.
Obviously that's key to their business. And loads of people like tried different algorithms, and then one team got through. So that's why like there's a certain algorithm that now really, really good at matching you to other people and certain content.
Okay.
Just as you said, like a human couldn't do that. Wouldn't be able to for that many people.
Yeah.
Many things they've already said like this is surpassing people's ability already.
It's a really like to steer it slightly in the direction the conversation will eventually go. From a product point of view, I think that like movie selection is a really hard problem to crack, because I think that there's two extremes now. You've got the Netflix example, which is like, it seems like it's got a huge choice because it only shows you things that you'd like, which is kind of like, it's like the lack of choice, really. It's just like, okay, well, we know you like these things, but we're kind of hiding the fact that our catalogue is getting smaller or changing all the time. And then you've got something like a platform that I use quite a lot called Mubi, which is like an independent movie platform. And it doesn't have an algorithm. It's just like, here's movies, and it has a movie of the day, and that's it. And you can barely even search by genre. And it's really annoying. And I always, because you've got to like read the blurb, look it up, watch the trailer. Do I like the actors? Nothing's been recommended to you. And loads of the times you're halfway through a film and you're like, oh man, this is a bad choice. But, like 9 times out of 10, it's like, it makes you think about it. You're actually kind of like consuming a little bit more consciously than just like an algorithm has spat this out at me, which I actually really like.
Your world is not defined.
You think machine learning and AI or deep learning in product is good then? Overall?
No, I don't necessarily. I think depending on what you're doing, it can be very useful. But when it comes to like, I don't know. I think we've got a little bit to a point now where entertainment has become very homogenized, and it's like, I was actually with a friend's daughter a few days ago, and she was watching YouTube, like pop music on YouTube, and like, it sounds like a computer has made it, because it all sounds like tonally the same, and it's like being obviously churned out by an algorithm, and it's just like, watch the next one, watch the next one, watch the next one. And if there was something on there that was jarring or didn't quite fit with the rest of them, she would have switched it off. So it's like this gluing together of content and making things seem the same is so good for people that are just like binge watching or habitually consuming stuff and not actually consciously thinking, I want to watch this now. That's my opinion on it.
So what kind of examples or what context would machine learning be good in product development process? What kind of context? Or a better question there, I think, for you, Jonny, is how would a product manager know when and when not to implement these kind of things? Seems like it's not just a random chance, right?
Yeah, no, it is a good question. And I think you see more and more in sort of startups today, and especially large companies, AI specialists and data scientists coming in. And obviously they really good at building models, and in product, you're good at finding problems. So that's why you want to be looking at it and going, I can kind of understand the world you're in. And it's often when you find yourself, you've got a lot of data, categorized or run, and you then start to say, okay, there's a problem here that I think we could potentially answer with this data, and we've got a lot of it, but I don't want to do this manually. Let's build some intelligent system around it. And that's usually the first conversation to go down in that kind of route. But I'd say that the honestly the best thing is because you hear a lot of people come out with crazy ideas that they think they can do with them, machine learning. And that when you've got a bit of knowledge into it, you can start to say, hold your horses, that's probably not going to be possible, or that is possible what you're thinking, because they've seen things like sort of OpenAI and how amazing that is. And you have that conversation of, oh, we could do something like that. And then you have to sort of go, that's very possible, but we don't have the amount of money or infrastructure to train something with that many nodes and that much processing.
Yeah.
So
it's an expensive process, I guess, huh? That's not a cheap thing to implement. You can't just do it over the weekend with a laptop and
you can
bunch of coffee.
Yeah, like, say you wanted to work out customer churn. Very, you've got data, quite a simple problem. Are they going to churn or not? You could build a model to do that. If you want to sort of forecast sales, yet again, you've probably got enough data, you could probably forecast your sales going to be. That's good. It's when you start going into those more sort of much more complicated problems, large, huge data sets, or more sort of like general problem sort of data sets, but it starts to become very expensive to say, right, we now need quite high accuracy. We need to really train it on all these parameters, make sure it's not overfitted, and then want to sort of like make sure it's reliable when we give that out as a product. So I think there's like problems in the past where we got released an AI product, and then it was like self-learning, say from Twitter, and then it started to veer off into sort of hate speech in a sense.
yeah. There's so many classic examples of that now.
Oh, hate speech.
Oh yeah, across the board. No, I mean like where people have trained an algorithm on Twitter or like on a big data set, and like come out with this horrendous,
immediately genocidal.
Yeah. Jonny, let's go back a step, because I would like to know why, and I'm sure the listeners are interested too. Why are you the person to talk to us on this topic? What's your role and what do you do?
So, yeah, okay, good question again, I guess. So I am
the dude we found in a coffee shop.
Yeah,
Jonny, come on, go up here, mate.
Yeah, so you guys were walking down the street and you said, "Do I know anything about AI?" No, you said,
you had that AI T-shirt.
Yeah. No, so I've sort of worked in product for a number of years on sort of technical products, and we started to look into AI within those products, which then drove me into studying for my master's in artificial intelligence. Then I can then start applying that internally and products in that space. So kind of a natural journey from first sort of like launching some small AI products and going, "Oh, this is very interesting. Let's try and explore this further," and then seeing all the common traps that we fell into and other people fell into. So, I loved it from the product side, but then it was very much, okay, if I really want to dive into these type of products, you kind of need to know the tech behind it. Hence why I thought I'd do my master's in it. It's almost like early days in sort of web product managers. You start to have to understand the tech behind it, so you can really have that good conversation with the engineers and the users and understand what's possible.
So you were working as a project manager or a developer, is that right? In your early career?
So my early career, I was an electronics engineer working in submarines. So,
okay.
Designing parts for submarines. So
yeah.
Somewhere in the
door handles.
Yeah.
Electronic door handles.
Window latches.
Yeah.
Yeah. So somewhere in the world, there's like a couple of submarines with a few sensors on that I've designed. So that was interesting, because we had like one KPI for that was, if a submarine goes down, it has to come back up, right? There's no...
Yeah, you don't need an algorithm to tell you what to do there.
You can't, there's no real iterative process of going, right, guys, can you go off into the sea with the sensors? If it doesn't work, come back and tell us, because if it doesn't work, there's no feedback.
Yeah, they haven't come back for a really long time.
Yeah.
So, very, very different style.
That's interesting that you started in that field, because I think Mihao, our previous guest, actually, he studied engineering alongside his programming, and he went in the programming direction. So what lured you to the world of technology, or software, should I say?
It was a trip to Vietnam, going a day early. So I was working on the submarine business, and I thought, okay, what's the average time to release here? It's not weeks, it's years.
Oh my God, okay.
Yeah. And sometimes it was like a 15-year release cycle.
Yeah.
I was like, yes, I don't want to be here when I'm 60 going, oh.
I've got 3 good releases under my belt.
So then I thought, I've gone through the design phase and it's gone to sort of manufacturing. I'm going to go travel. So booked a plane ticket to Asia, landed in Vietnam. And it all comes down to like booking a day early. So I was going to go with a friend, and we were going to stay in like sort of around hotel.
Yeah.
But you know what? I've got a few extra days. I'm going to go early. I'll go stay in a hostel. And I ended up bumping into a chief product officer, who was also traveling. And she happened to be big in the product world in London. I was just sitting with her having breakfast, and she said, "Oh, I think you'd make a great product manager." And I was like, "Oh, cool. What's that? No idea." Sort of explained it to him. I was like, "Oh, that's exactly the kind of job I've been kind of doing and into." So glad I took that plane journey. And then she sort of mentored me, and I sort of went into this world. Yeah.
And then you ended up at PlayStation, right? You were working for Sony for a while. Nice. I wanted to ask actually if you knew of any AI they were implementing at PlayStation in that process.
So there was an AI team at Sony. There was definitely, I just wasn't in that business unit. So like the way Sony, like the way PlayStation is, it's so big. Like when you're sitting in a startup and you think, oh man, we're really growing. We're at 50 people now, and then you get to scale up and you think, all right, we're at 300. That's like a business unit. You guys
That's a small amount of people for Sony.
Yeah. You're focusing on the color of the button for sign up.
Yeah, like,
you 300 people are focusing on the button color.
Cyan.
18, 20 different business units. So we've like developer experience to the gaming experience, the way they tested games. I wish I was in that team, kind of, because
don't we all? You
had like an entire room full of people that would have like glass windows, invite people in to play the games, cameras all about, and they would write the emotion the person's sort of feeling when they're playing the game.
Oh my God.
There's got to be some AI in that, facial recognition.
I think there might be. And, I was like, and they also then get to go play the games themselves. So I was like, damn, that's the job. That's the job I want right there.
I always wonder how much like turnover rate there is on games that get tested but not released. So there's people out there who've played up these games and never actually made it to market because of whatever reason.
There's a team at PlayStation that's probably the best gamers you could probably consider in that bracket in the world, and they're not allowed to compete professionally because they have the game years in advance, sometimes months in advance.
Amazing.
Because they play through it to make sure everything's okay, and then for the time it's like on the market for everyone else, they're already like god tier.
Yeah.
I think there's a story. I don't know how true it is, that one of like the subsidiaries that kind of worked for PlayStation kind of entered a FIFA tournament and wiped the floor with everyone in that tournament. I think they even beat the EA team as well.
He knew. He's been playing it for so long.
So long by the time the game came out.
Do you mind if I have a quick game? It's Sony's the biggest entertainment company in the world now, isn't it? They had a recent acquisition, I think, in the PlayStation, in the gaming world, and now that the whole company, including the music side and their publishing and movies, is now the biggest entertainment company in the world.
Oh wow, I wouldn't have guessed that actually. Alongside like Microsoft and I guess Disney counts, or even Universal and Virgin.
Yeah, but I think it's because their catalog is so wide-reaching into so many different areas.
So much IP. Right.
Sorry?
So much IP that they've got.
Yeah, exactly. But I guess that's another thing that it must play into it as well, when you can like tie all these threads together, like you're not just making games, you're making music and films and everything that surrounds those worlds. Like it's the reason why Disney's so successful, right?
And hardware product. They make like headphones and TVs and
exactly,
actual.
Yeah. But obviously this podcast is squarely aimed at startups, and Sony, as much as it's interesting, isn't a startup. But I wondered like how your journey went from humongous 300 person in a small team corporation to now what you're doing, and how you kind of brought those lessons with you and what world you're in now.
Well, let's back it up a little bit there. Tell us a little bit first about how a feature process was at PlayStation, just like a typical start to finish, and then maybe we can talk about how that compares to what you're doing now in a much smaller environment.
Cool. Yeah. So the way it worked at sort of the business unit I was in, or the product team I was in at PlayStation, was you kind of had the freedom to take on a lot bigger bets, right? Because they've they can take on so much more risk. So that was always one thing that we'd then divide into a lead PM and support PM. And this is a concept I really enjoyed. So the lead PM would be delivering something for that quarter. Here's a use case or a set of features I'm going to deliver, and here's the goal we're going to go towards. And the support PM would help with coordination and sort of anything in addition they need help with, because so many people, like for a single person to do all the coordination and deliver the product is quite a lot. But at the same time, the support PM would then be researching, so doing all their sort of user interviews, user research, prototyping and testing, while they're doing the support. And then when it gets to the end of the quarter, to switch. So now you go on to deliver your
interesting
support person now goes in support, and they go into sort of research mode, and they just help you with the sort of coordination. So very nice to go into, I'm in delivery, I'm in research mode, I'm in delivery, I'm in research mode. And that was really effective, because you also had someone there who's going to say, do you mind taking on these sort of tasks and doing that coordination side? So that's
and is that like a PlayStation secret recipe, or is that well known in the product?
Not
anymore. No, it was something they actually began to try out there, because as scale got larger and larger, there's so many avenues you can go down. So it became something like, right, how do we focus? How do we also make sure we're delivering new things at the same time? So that's what it became.
That's so cool. Love that.
That's a really nice process.
People delivering, people researching. But that's just not really possible when you move to
forget it. It's a good idea. Forget it.
Well, it's definitely something to keep in mind, like when you have the resources to facilitate it, right?
Yeah, like if you're a single product person, you're not going to be there going, right, I'm going to be doing research and just support while you guys are doing the lead. That's just not possible yet. But when you sort of get to scale up phase, then it becomes very possible, because your product team is now maybe 10 people. You can then go, right, because it helps you focus as well. And that's the thing that a lot of companies fail to do, especially early on, because there's so many good ideas, is focus, and that kind of helps you to say, right, well, only a few of you are going to be delivering against these initiatives, and the next few will be researching. So we're not delivering 10 different avenues at the same time.
And I guess as well, it's all based on like how complicated the actual product is, because it doesn't make any sense if you've got like quite a straightforward first iteration of a platform to deliver. You don't need like the backup PM being like, oh, there's not much to sweep up, but I'm still here. Exactly. But I guess if it's super complicated, then it makes loads of sense to have like somebody just being there with the interviews ready to go, and even at that early stage. That's really cool. Yeah,
that tends to happen over time as well. So you tend to start off in I say taking on big bets. So you guess a startup has a few big bets that they're going on. But these are our core things, big problems we're going to try and take on. And then over time, as you sort of delivered them, and this is the sort of core strategy of our company, where we're starting to see growth, you can then start to say, right, do we want to take on any more big bets? And the sort of problem space gets more complicated.
Yeah.
And that's kind of when you can say, yeah, right, let's look at going to support versus lead. Yeah.
And I guess when you have a revenue stream fixed and you're like earning month by month the same kind of earnings, and everything becomes a lot more locked, then that's when you can start diversifying that way.
Yeah, because risk becomes less scary for you.
Was there anything when you were working at PlayStation where you thought like, oh man, this is awful, I'd never take this into another context? Were there any like negatives to the process?
It's a lot of dependency management, which is hard to escape. So,
just go into a little bit of detail of what that might be.
So when you sort of work in component teams, which they semi-were, what do I mean by that? You look after a specific part of the product, and to deliver full value, that's the whole use case, I'm going to need maybe 3 or 4 other teams to deliver. And I think for every team you add on, your chance of delivery is 1 over that amount of teams. You've got 2 teams, one of them fails to deliver, you're not going to deliver on time, so 50% chance.
Okay.
You get to 3, you got 30% chance of delivering on time.
Yeah.
And that's very much problematic with component teams, because you need so many. That we need to deliver this feature, right? That's 5, 6 different components I need to build for that. So that was like a problem, but we kind of shifted into trying to go down feature teams or whole use case teams where a team would deliver end to end. So I would definitely take that approach out from there, because in the beginning that was It's almost when you sit down and say, right, how's everyone doing with their features of the building to deliver this end value? That can be a bit of a nightmare. Like, keeping track of all that across like such a huge organization. So scarred a little bit from that to be like, right, that was pretty intense, but I'm glad that they shifted into feature. So I would definitely take the feature element away from that.
Well, I can imagine even on a the small scale that I work of, like on a dev team, the like, you know, making sure that you're constantly dissolving dependencies, be that with your other developers or that like the back end team that you're working with or the project team as a whole. Like that's just a small team of 30 people. So I can imagine like on a huge scale, like when you've got dependencies of on the scale of you're saying like hundreds of people in a team, that must be so hard. It must be real hard work.
Yeah. It's why they had like program managers as well. Okay. Who were like almost like the dependency gods trackers that would be like, how is everyone doing? But yeah, like even if you're saying like trying to get rid of those dependencies, it's so much value in doing that, because you tend to see what startups will do is they'll have like a single team build. Let's just build everything that we can. Everyone's going to build together. Second team comes along, right? You're in charge of these components or this part of and you know, maybe it's the user management system, might be the front end, some of the front end. Really, maybe even at some point you start the conversation and say, right, should we just be two feature teams that are going to deliver like complete end to end for the customer? Because as we scale, we're really going to like be thankful we went down that route.
I guess it's one of those things where, I mean, I'm sure you can talk to this a lot more than I can, but I imagine that must be a huge motivator to move away from that world. If you're at the level where you're kind of working in a big team but you're still only a component as a team, and you don't get the satisfaction of seeing it end to end, but you know that you might be able to, like, if we were a feature team delivering small features as opposed to one feature team delivering one giant feature. I mean, I think that would be hugely demoralizing for me if I couldn't see the sort of scale myself.
Especially if you're not the customer focusing part. You could just you're handling some data 3 levels down, and it's like, I've done that. I've passed that API call on. Cool. What was the impact? What did it do?
Yeah.
I remember I've seen companies before where I've chatted to the engineering teams like, oh, what do you do? Don't actually know. I know.
Don't actually know what I'm doing it. Yeah. Well, it's the same with last week when we were talking to Mihao. He worked at Google for a long time, and he said that was one of the motivators of him moving on, was because at a startup, you know, you're getting your hands dirty and you're actually kind of, you know, you're building this stuff out and your decisions matter. Which, as someone who's only ever worked in small environments, like I can't imagine not. It's really like a real kind of like pivot in my brain to think that I could do something that would never be kind of like seen on a global company scale. But I guess, it's kind of pairing those big company learnings and bringing them in where you can is very, very valuable as well.
Yeah, I totally agree with that.
Yeah.
But just to answer your question, sort of like, what am I doing now?
Yeah.
From being sort of, a PM to going sort of freelancing. So I moved to Berlin last year.
Shout out to Berlin. Shout out to the Berlin crew.
Techno hub.
And that was it. Like, it was, the scene here was growing massively, right? So there's a lot of investment, a lot of startups happening here, in Germany especially. So it was like, okay, that's sort of, while I'm here, I'm sort of figuring out what I'm going to do in Germany. It was like, let's go freelance. And then started sort of working for smaller companies, and then working for, it's a pretty cool company at the moment that's sort of building an accounting-based sort of software language for accountants. So it's a whole different problem space there.
A software language for accountants?
Yeah, so it's, as it says, so like to solve accounting problems. Is like a language to help them.
That sounds ideal for implementation of machine learning, though, doesn't it?
Yes. Yeah, it does, because a lot of data. And so I'm pretty sure that company will go down that route. Yeah,
follow-up question. Are you implementing machine learning on that?
I think they might, because recently they've acquired a machine learning company. So
that's a good indicator, yeah.
Yeah.
Something like that, yeah.
I'm not saying it now, but might be a good indicator. But in that sense, though, because I mean, I'm sort of more adjacent to this world of like product management, and I'm not entirely sure whether it's a bit of a grey area. A lot of the lines and stuff for me. Where does the manager come into the machine learning part of that? Why isn't it the technology team or the data and analytics team that then sort of takes those and runs with it, or is it the product manager that's saying, okay, I've got these learnings now and I want to do something with them, or how does it sit together?
It's kind of like any space, really. So you could say that about, we've got a web dev team, go build. That's what you create. And that's, obviously great for creating prototypes or proof of concepts. But when you want to have a bit of a product eye on it and say, right, we should build a model that answers these questions, or is for this particular customer need, but also let's think about the externals around it as well. Like, how are we going to market this? What are the exceptions that we need to test and try out? And is there really a market that we can push this into? Kind of that. If you just run purely research based, we're just going to research different models and different things. Maybe you could do that without a PM, because you're very much just seeing what's capable with the data that you've got. But I guess when you want to start putting that to customers, the sort of customer space, you kind of then want a product manager in there.
So it's just really important for a product manager to have like an understanding of AI and machine learning at a base level. Yeah, because
it helps in case, like, say, maybe a director or a salesperson comes to you and says, "Great idea. The customer wants to do AI, but to do this, or have this automated." And then you can answer straight away and say that's probably not possible with the data we've got or the infrastructure. Or you can go to your sort of team and then actually have like a genuine conversation to say, right, realistically, what's the accuracy we can get on this? How long is it going to take to train? Do we have enough data? What other data do we need to get? Should we build anything into the product that's going to start collecting the data for the long term? Have those kind of conversations. And if you're building like a developer-focused product as well, you can then start to have the conversation about what you're returning. So say you have an API that you send a request, it performs some machine learning for you, it gives you back an answer, or then you can start the conversation. So, right, what algorithm are we using? Are we going to return confidence scores and probability? We're just returning, binary. This is true. This is not. How are we going to shape this to the end user so they can get use out of it? So you can generally have those conversations of what's the interface and really, what can we show our developers and how are you building that? So what final algorithm are you using? So you can look at a pipeline. You might not understand everything. They might come to you and say, we're using this new optimization algorithm that is going to return this kind of output. And you're like, I don't understand that, but
just nodding.
Well, that's a good point though. Like, it's a good supplementary learning thing for any product managers out there who are looking what to learn next, especially in a startup. And if you can find someone has also an understanding of machine learning, even on a base level, it sounds like that's going to help make these decisions much faster. Then, like, we could probably automate this in a smart way, but I have no idea how to do that. So,
but it's like there's this sort of saying that no one really has an original idea, right? There's only a few base stories in the world, and it's kind of like that with problem solving. You are realistically you look at a problem and say, what pre-recipes or do I have in my head?
Yeah, sure.
So I know it now. I can start to visualize the world in that way. So by understanding this technology, you can start to say, I now see a new way of potentially solving that and stuff.
But I guess it's also it speaks to the fact that being involved with the startup, at that early phase, it being kind of a jack of all trades, master of none, probably master of one, is so useful because the teams are small and very agile. Everything's moving very quickly. And
being a jack of all trades and master of one is probably quite useful.
Yeah. But no,
being a master of something and then also lots.
But the thing is, but at a CEO level, you can be a master of none. Like, you don't have to. It's passion gets you so far. Like, you don't. You can be a jack of all trades. I don't think you need to be a master of anything.
Before we move away though from algorithms, unless you had a point you wanted to finish there.
It's just interesting for me because I would never stick those two things together. Like, definitely, we've spoken to the point of like, teams needing to wear many hats. And like we were talking to Roman, a few weeks ago about his engineering team and he's definitely like looking a lot of design stuff as well. And kind of like, that's part of his role. But yeah, I personally would never have kind of put these two worlds together, but it shows that just this kind of like broad spectrum of knowledge in this area is so vital when you're in a startup environment, because you need to make decisions fast. And that's like one of the highest skills you can have, like accurate short-term decision making. So it all helps, doesn't it?
You could even spot an opportunity, and that's probably the most interesting part for someone in a startup is, we're solving this problem, we should maybe start collecting data in this fashion or collecting this data, because it might be very useful for us in the future if we want to put some AI.
Yeah, missing those opportunities. Yeah, that's interesting.
Because that's always what hurts the most, isn't it? When you get to scale up much later on, you go, wow, all right, what data do we have? And it's very much just, here's the functional data that we needed to have the program work at the time, and it's recording in like 50 different tables, so get cleaning that and joining it together.
Good luck with that.
Yeah, I wanted to ask before we move too far away from algorithms, you're going to love the name of this one, Tim. I wanted to ask about something called the Perceptron Algorithm, which sounds it looks much cooler written down than it does written out loud. But
does he work with Megatron and the other Decepticons?
Exactly. Perceptron. He's just really good at perceiving the environment around him.
That's actually not too far off. That's exactly what it is.
It's transforming helicopter. It
transforms inputs into an output to perceive the world around it. That is essentially it.
Give us a high level
Perceptron,
a high level of what it is and how it can relate to our startup listeners out there.
So the way to think of the Perceptron algorithm is it's like a single unit within a neural net. You have many nodes, and each one of those nodes is performing some sort of function. It says, you've given me this data, and this is the output. So if you look at it, sort of just you take a single node and feed it some inputs and have a sort of a single output. That's your basic unit. That's your almost like single unit of a larger neural net. And it was almost like the first concept that you sort of come to. So it does very basic classification to say, this is or this isn't. So almost think of it's almost doing like a best line on a graph. So that's kind of what it's doing. It's just sort of almost like a linear equation in some sense. We'll say, if you're above this line, true, we've classified you as this. If you fall below the line, we'll classify you.
So for some context there, it could be like, this many users we have all these users, and everything above this line is in our target group, or
almost something like that. So you could say housing, or the definition of housing market, I guess it doesn't apply, but yeah, some sort of classification that say houses are this or grades. You've got this kind of grades and this sort of attendance. Did they make it into college? Were they accepted? Yes, no. We sort of perceive that from these two inputs and say, yeah, it's kind of above the line. We think they got in. And then the way you sort of train it is you adjust the weights. So there's a concept of weights feeding into it. And they're just numbers, or almost like multipliers that kind of go in. If a point is too far away from the line, you'll adjust the weight so the line gets closer. And that's kind of really what a machine learning is sticking loads of these perceptrons together to change how the line of best fit will look.
How does a company know when they've got enough data for this to be worth implementing? Yeah. Is there, I know it's a bit of an ambiguous number, but is there kind of like a turning point, like, a ballpark figure?
The more the merrier is kind of where yeah.
So if I've got a few hundred users, probably not worth the time and effort, but I guess it's a...
Yeah, it depends how much data is being produced, because you need enough for the algorithm to be trained on. So obviously, where you have to divide your data into a training set, sort of a testing set, and you need enough that the weights can be adjusted. Basically, it gets to a point where it's almost like applied statistics. It has enough sort of numbers going through that it can adjust itself, that it has a reasonable output and accuracy. But you need enough training data to be able to do that. So if you've got a few hundred, there are techniques out there where you can sort of simulate the data. You take the data you've got and then you sort of randomly pick points in it and reproduce it to scale up your data. Mm-hmm. But really what you should be asking is, are we only ever going to have this small amount of data, and is it worth us going down this route, say, to predict something?
It's a real commitment from a company, a startup, especially a startup's perspective, right? You have to commit to the path.
What would be the ideal size of the data set then?
I think there's probably like standard numbers you can go out there and say this is how much you'd probably want.
15,000 datas.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely in the thousands, definitely hundreds of thousands is where you're starting to get like that's a nice size data set now.
Okay.
You could probably kind of eyeball a lot of it, but I mean, I don't know how ridiculously ignorant that is, but I feel like if you've got like 1,000 node points, you could just look at it and be like, okay, I can pretty much make these assumptions based on this smaller data set. It's only when it gets to like a complicated level.
Is it too much now for me to go through as well and manually do this thing as well?
Yeah, mechanically Turk this.
Yeah. Can I pay someone on Fiverr to do it?
Yeah. But it's really, do I really have enough so that I'm training the algorithm properly that's not overfitted to a certain data set? So when new data comes in, it's like, we're just classifying you wrong because you were kind of I never really saw you in the training data set before. That kind. So you want a sort of large enough sample. And you also don't want it to bias too much in one direction. So say you had all these customers that are like selected yes on something and only 2 selected no, then your data set's going to be massively biased in one direction. It's almost useless.
Do you have this may show my lack of knowledge of machine learning algorithms, but like if you're highly training an algorithm or an AI to do this stuff, is it often the case that can actually become the product itself, or that can be kind of like useful in a wider world, or is it only specific on one data set and it's like we've got the learning, delete it?
No, so that's essentially what GPT-3 is, like a general purpose model. They trained it on like a huge data set and it's been built in a way that it's now general. So that they've literally taken that concept you said and said, that's now a product. You can now sell into that. But I think that only is ever really going to apply to large companies that can train on such a huge data set. I think it has something like 1 billion nodes or something.
Yeah, crazy.
That's just like not something some small startup's going to do. So that is one of the things to take into account is like a lot of the big sort of AI sort of model spaces that you go into in problems have kind of been taken over by like the Googles, it's sort of Apples and Amazons of this world.
Yeah.
They have the infrastructure and data to do it. But like specific problems, like small problems that, this is very tailored to our industry or our niche. There's an opportunity there where you have like that niche data.
And is there a lot of shared learnings in this space for like, say, for example, a startup that might be, as you said, it's like there's only a certain amount of stories in the world. It's like there's only a certain amount of probably problems where and data sets that this stuff would fit in. Is it like open source? If you were building an AI to do something, would you then be like, okay, we've built this if anybody else wants to use it? Or is it like industry secrets kind of thing?
It can be both, but like there's a huge community. So you can see a lot of people go to Kaggle.
Yeah.
Do the sort of competitions there. So there's huge learnings in that space.
Oh, what is that? I don't know actually. Sorry. What that is.
So it's like a data science competition site where they give data sets.
Okay.
Open source data sets and allow people to try and build models to train. And so who gets the best accuracy, and then everyone will share how they've done it.
Yeah.
And then you can see, right, you applied this technique or you applied this technique. So the community, because everyone wants to sort of push that the model's getting better. So it's kind of that community.
Mm-hmm.
Then when you get to sort of, say, like a big company that's built a model that's solving their problem, there's absolutely no way they're going to be like,
yeah. This is just how the Facebook newsfeed works, guys.
Yeah, have it. Sooner or later we'll find it, right? I guess like in 20, 30 years down the line when we see how everything, when it's all redundant, it would be interesting to really see.
Well, it's like that's what TikTok is, right? It's not a social media platform. It's basically there's a huge supercomputer in China that they're just feeding all the data into.
I know that that's probably true, but it sounds like a conspiracy theory. There's a giant like TikTokatron, and it's that like feeding on the data, and
but it's not even a conspiracy theory. It's just, that's the owner, the company that owns it. That's what they've said. That's what they're building it for.
It promotes different things in different countries too, right? That's quite an interesting. Again, don't know how true that is, but someone's saying that like in China, the algorithm is more likely to promote someone who does something of like engineering value or mathematics or some sort of like entrepreneurial value, whereas like in America, like it's arguably its enemy state. like pushes the children or the youth who just do dancing and like nonsense.
Happy,
they just do like nonsense stuff for whatever reason. So it's a good way to like oppress an entire generation of people.
Well, they've done a good job. I mean, if you see that now in America, the number one job for kids they want to be is a TikTok influencer. It's not.
That's a pretty huge piece of evidence for the crazy conspiracy theory. Because what point does it stop becoming a conspiracy theory, right? Like,
well, I mean, that's the who knows how the algorithm's working, but they've certainly got that computer. It's about to transform into. What did Megatron turn into? A gun. That's what he transformed into, wasn't it?
Well, I don't know how you got that. I think I blacked out for a second and you were talking about
I went back to Transformers, sorry.
All right, Johnny, what are you working on right now? What's currently in the pipeline for you? I know you're working on your own project.
Yes, I've got a few sort of like irons in the fire at the moment. So obviously working my sort of freelance space. So that sort of accountancy firm that's doing a really interesting problem of building their own sort of programming language. So they're really working on that. It's really interesting. And also looking into how to best solve incidents in the world in the software space.
You got a plug there? You got a company name for us to look out for?
Not yet. Not yet.
Unusual name.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. It's interesting. All stealth right now, is it? I see. Yeah, it's funny you say that's the best one, because I actually did the Curse of Lestrade on a one-shot.
Ah, yeah, you told me about that.
Yeah, and it works out really well. Just you introduce them in the house, they meet those two creepy kids at the beginning.
Yeah.
They explore the house, go to the basement, and then some chaos ensues, yeah.
I think it has the best story out of any like pre-made campaign. And the little horror element in it. Just nod the characters along.
There were some cool bits that my party missed out. Like there's like a tree, or it's a painting, and it looks like there's some kids dancing in the leaves. But if they inspect it, they're actually being eaten alive by bats. It's not leaves at all.
Bats.
Yeah,
a bit of foreshadowing.
Yeah, so it's
I think that house foreshadows the entire campaign. Actually, there's nods to the entire campaign throughout that scene. It's like because you find a shard of amber, and the amber temple is like the big bad. You know, like that's the thing that's powering Strahd.
I would like to watch a long form Star Wars one. Someone do a Star Wars one.
Star Wars D&D.
I'm sure someone's done that.
Yeah, I just haven't actually seen like a good one anywhere. Johnny, did you see the Obi-Wan trailer yet?
No, I did. Yeah,
it's good.
Yeah, I still don't know how they're going to address the aging from.
Yeah. He ages so fast
to 70.
Do you think there'll be a showdown, Darth Vader Obi-Wan showdown?
Oh, it's already happened, hasn't it, in Rebels?
But like in the live action, will they
do it again? Maybe because in Rebels it's the first time they see each other a long time, and obviously it ends pretty definitively. So
I haven't seen Rebels.
You haven't seen that showdown between him and Darth Maul?
Watch. Not Darth Maul. I mean Darth Vader.
Oh, Vader. Maybe, yeah, for sure.
Vader's in it. They released a clip of Vader, like a shot of Vader.
Yeah, for sure there will be, but then they have to make sure it doesn't bump into the dialogue between them in episode 4, right?
Yeah, because he calls him. It'd be so cool that he kind of addresses the fact that he calls him Darth because he calls him Darth in episode 4. And he's just like, strike me down, Darth, and I'll become more powerful than you'll ever imagine.
Well, because he doesn't know he's called Vader yet, does he? It's just Darth something or other.
Ah, okay, yeah.
Technically, he shouldn't know.
Yeah, so maybe that's it. Or maybe it's like what's your name now? I'm not telling you. And that's it. And he flies off.
It could be. It could be interesting. I saw a really funny video of like them watching the Force healing. And it's Anakin's like, Master, how is she doing that? And Obi-Wan's like, well, it does appear to be very useful. And he's like, talking to Yoda about it as well. It's really funny. They do all their voices so good. And he's like, Master Yoda, why didn't you teach us this? And Yoda's like, oh, it's pretty good. Yeah. Awesome. I don't know how you fuck up a series like that with massive, massive oversights like Force healing exists.
Yeah, let's not get into the whole bloody sequel trilogy.
Did you watch the extended Death of Jango Fett though?
No.
Shows you the actual thing they shot with Mace Windu killing him, and then it shows you the extended with CGI and then without CGI, and the extended with CGI. He chops off his arm, then slices him. He tries to jet back away, and he chops off his head, and it's really violent. He tries to get away. He's like fuck, and then just gets his head chopped off, and
Jesus.
And they cut it down to just this one swipe.
Yeah,
there's still the part where he picks up the helmet at the end, and there's nothing that drips out or anything.
Yeah, I always thought that there'd be a head. Even at the young age that I watched it, I was like, there surely should be a head.
Just fall out,
Yeah, dark. But apparently they had, in that same scene, they had in the first cut, they had one of the creatures chasing after in the arena. One of the creatures tears apart an R2 droid, and apparently the R2 characters have got such a personality that they weren't allowed to keep it in there for the U rating or the 12 plus or whatever it was. If the droid got torn apart, they would have had to change the rating of it because.
That's quite interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's intense.